of Escape from Planet of the Apes, they leave this big cliffhanger that there's going to be another film. Well, they did eventually make another film. And first of all, I got to apologize. I said at the beginning of the whole Planet of the Apes, I said that there was 11 films. I don't know why I keep thinking that there's 11. There's only 9. For some reason, I keep thinking that there's 11 films. Maybe it feels like 11? I don't know. But I keep saying that there's 11 films when really there is 9 if you count. Now that's counting the reboots and other films we're going to get into. But right now we're on the original saga. And like I said, at the end of Escape from Planet of the Apes, they leave this big cliffhanger because Cornelius and Zira are brutally murdered by the government, and because of the threat of the apes going to take over man is now upon them. Well, that brings us to Conquest of the Planet of the Apes from 1972. This film was really inspired by the civil rights riots of the 1960s and early 70s. Also, things like the Black Panther Party and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, things of that nature that was going on the 60s and early 70s. A lot of revolutionary type of stuff going on. And so this is Paul Dean, the writer. This was his interpretation of that, incorporated into the Planet of the Apes lore. Also, the director J. Lee Thompson was very influenced as well, so he thought it should reflect what was going on at the time. Now, I'll get into some other things about this film, because here's the cautionary tale. Again, viewer discretion is advised. Like all the other films, the films were rated G, which means that anybody can come to the film and not be offended necessarily, even though there was some questionable things in it. But parents were taking their children. That's the main thing. That the Planet of the Apes, like Star Wars, was the biggest audience was children. Children attach itself to its fantasy elements and things like that. And but this one was rated PG. So yeah, again, viewer discretion is advised. This film is rated PG. It is extremely violent. So do pre-screen this film before you choose to show it to your children. Yeah, this was PG back in the 1970s. There was no such thing as a PG-13 rating. Yeah, so it was either G, PG, or R. That was the ratings choice. And so, yeah, this film received a PG rating from the MPAA after a big test screening, because this film almost got an R rating. I'll talk about that in the second portion. So let's roll the film. This is Conquest of Planet of the Apes from 1972. So Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth film in the entire Apes saga. This is definitely a grim movie. It's totally violent and just, it's a lot more graphic than what the previous entries entails. There's a lot. This was so graphic in its violence at the time that sorry, I'm playing with the Blu-ray player, but this was so graphic that at the time the film almost got an R rating based on what they had filmed. And when they did a test screening, see, all the Planet of the Apes films, I guess, were test screened, and when it came to Conquest, parents were taking their children out of the theater, and they really did not like the ending of the film. The ending of the film was much more grim than what ended up being released to the public. What was released to the public was a re-edited, overdubbed version. And that's the version I watched, was the theatrical version. Now, a lot of people would say that you need to watch the other version. 20th Century Fox was generous enough when they released Conquest of the Planet of the Apes on Blu-ray to incorporate both versions, both the theatrical and the original intended version. And the original intended version was much more grim than what ended up being released. The governor was killed in the original version. Roddy McDowell's speech was far more unforgiving. And so what happened was, because of parents protesting, and the film almost got an R rating, that they decided to cut it back to a PG rating by re-editing the final sequence and incorporating an overdub of Roddy McDowell saying, "We can show compassion to the humans. If he is to be dominated, he is to be dominated humanely and with compassion," and thus setting up for the fifth film. And so the film was eventually released with a PG rating in the theaters in 1972. Like I said, my personal opinion, I think it's a far more grim film than the previous entries, because this is the film that shows in an alternate timeline how the apes rose up. And so it's far more violent and very, very just downbeat and grim. The film still is a very good film. It's actually one of the shorter ones in the first 5 films. It's only 87 minutes in length. But yeah, it's just a gritty, downbeat film. So that is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Now the 5th film, which we'll look at next time, some interesting things change in that part of the series. So from me to you, see you later.